Okay, thank you very much everyone for joining. I hope you're all well. Just a quick introduction. My name is James. I work for Affinity as one of the software engineers. Previously, I was mainly just demoing the software as a product expert, but I moved to development almost 2 years ago now. I think that time has just flown by. So basically, we've had a couple of major updates since Affinity version 3, or Affinity by Canva, as it's formerly known, was introduced late last November. And basically we've had 3.1 and 3.2 updates. I was going to perhaps do a live stream for 3.1, but I decided just to hold out a little bit so we could have like a mega stream covering all the new functionality for, for me, it would be a focus on raster processing or image editing, photographic functionality, that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm rambling as I usually do at the start of these things just to get the nerves out of the way. I hope you appreciate that. But we're going to dive into the new functionality first. Rather selfishly, I am going to focus on a number of the bits and pieces that I've introduced. But I will cover some other functionality as well. Mainly just because I like to ramble on a little bit. I like to nerd out about the decision-making process behind why I've chosen to make things a certain way and behave a certain way, rather. That sort of thing. Okay, so first on the list then, we have live tone blend groups. Now, I do have a video tutorial on this, so you may see some repeated content here, mainly because rather than creating fresh new content, this just worked really well for the demonstrative purposes. For those of you who are more into photographic workflows, fear not, that is all coming. But first, I just want to get this out of the way because I think it's hopefully a really useful feature. So, when you're doing compositions, one of the things you'll often do is try and blend different composite images together. So in this case, I've got these asteroid cutout layers that I've placed onto the scene. So I wanted to devise an easy way to blend these based on the underlying composition or the underlying layer data, and have it be performant as well so that it could render live. And so what I came up with is this. So if you select all of these asteroid layers, or any of your composite layers, you can go to the top pixel menu and you can choose Live Tone Blend Group. And it will put them in this new type of group layer. Pretty much straight away, you will see the result, the intended outcome. You get a little dialog here, and you can bring this up just by clicking on the thumbnail. So let's say you move away to work on some other layers. You can bring this up just by clicking on the thumbnail here, and you've got access to the blend strength. So that's the overall blending contribution. You've got blend color, so you can just choose to blend based on luminosity rather than color data as well. And you've got low pass, which doesn't appear to make a huge amount of difference to this image, but I'll explore it in a subsequent example. Okay, and you've got the content type down here as well. So different blending for different content types. The default will be based on whatever you've created the initial tone blend group with. So if you've created it with vector shapes or text layers, it will set the appropriate type by default for you. Okay, so the cool thing about this is that, let's say I double click into one of these layers and move it around. The blending happens in real time, so it updates. You can see as I move this layer around. So it's not this destructive process where you select a couple of layers like the target layer and the source layer, and then you run a filter and then it's kind of baked in. This is a completely live, non-destructive process. And the other cool thing about this is why it's so great to show this off, because people get it instantly. They're like, ah, right, I see what it's doing. Is I've got a number of different backgrounds to use, and as I cycle through them, look at the blending on all the asteroids, everything that's in this live tone blend group, it automatically updates, and that's especially powerful, that one there. So yeah, I just thought this was a really great example and a nice kind of flashy introduction to the live stream, basically. So if you take layers out of the live tone blend group, they will no longer blend. So you see this one over here. So it's very much a dynamic process. You can just add additional things into the group and have them blend instantly. So What I wanted to do, rather than just kind of retread the examples I had in the video tutorial, was explore something slightly different. This could be a swing and a miss, but yeah, I just thought I would have a go nonetheless. So I took one of my images, let's crop it to a 16:9 resolution. Okay, and I'm going to make this kind of a pixel art image background type thing. So let's start by making it a bit crunchier. Let's add a levels adjustment. Just scooch those tones in. been trying to find a way to introduce that phrase, scooch. So we'll scooch those tones in a little bit. And then we will add, where's it gone? Posterize. So we'll posterize the color data. Let's go for something like this. So you can just start to see the banding, the bit depth breakup there. Okay, and then we will add a live pixelate filter as well. Let's preserve alpha. I don't think I need to do that, but just to be safe, let's go for, yeah, let's pixelate it a little bit, something like this. Okay, so we've got this kind of pixel art-esque type thing going on here. Now you might be wondering, where's he going with this? Because this is about live tone blend groups. So there's a kind of almost inadvertent extra feature that you get when using tone blend groups with things like vector shapes. And it's background blur, essentially. So one of our developers was actually talking about why, you know, it'd be really cool if we could have like a background blur feature where essentially the underlying layer contribution is blurred through in a kind of transparent manner. And you can basically achieve a very similar thing using live tone blend groups. So if I bring out a rounded rectangle, maybe let's just put it over here for now, and I make its color a mid-gray. Doesn't have to be completely precise, somewhere around there. Then I put it inside a live tone blend group. Check this out. I get this really cool background blur effect. I move it around, you'll see what's happening there. So that was quite funky. And then I thought, okay, well, let's do this for an example. Maybe I can add a border to this as well and add some text in. So you can have like almost like a pixel art game cutscene type thing with some text, and that's where I'm going with this anyway. But while I'm here, I'll just show you the low pass, what that does. So essentially, you can control the, to a degree anyway, you can control the amount of blur that the background layer data that's blended through actually receives. So here you can choose to reveal more of the actual fine detail versus blurring it more significantly. So we'll stick with that for now, but I can play around with that. And then let's add some frame text. So I'll just type some nonsense to get a suitable font size, maybe something like that. Let's choose a font as well. I quite fancied DIN, D-I-N, there we are. Okay, and now we have to type something meaningful. So the lighthouse. That's, oh, get my punctuation correct. That's where I'll find the my touch typing is atrocious, as you can see. Let's make up some copy here. Okay. So there's our copy. I'll just turn on snapping and position that roughly in the center there. Okay. And then, yeah, what I think I'll group these and pixelate them as well. Because the juxtaposition of clean pixel content versus pixelated doesn't quite work for me. So let's pixelate it slightly. Something like that. Oh, by the way, nice little tip. The probably lesser known thing. On all of the input boxes in the Affinity app, you can use the mouse wheel, rock the mouse wheel up and down to increment or decrement the input value there. That's quite useful. I use that quite a lot. Let's go for something like that, maybe. Okay, ooh, didn't mean to zoom in. There we are. Okay, and then we can move this around. So you can kind of reposition this, and as you can see, the background blur effect that we've emulated updates automatically in real time. Okay, so yeah, I'm just exploring examples. Basically, I thought it's a live stream. Why not try something out instead of just regurgitating what I did in the video tutorial? So there you are. There's an interesting workflow example. Okay, so that was the live tone blend group. If you want more information about that, there is a video tutorial you can watch. Listening to me talk and demonstrate, it's a bit of a slower pace in the tutorials, so it is a bit like watching paint dry, but you know, you'll hopefully get all the relevant information that you need from that. So next on the list then is the texture filter. This is new to 3.2. And I've kind of gone back and forth about exactly how I would describe this filter. It's the result of some creative experimentation, I think. And you'll find it, I like to use live filters wherever possible. So for me, it's under New Live Filter Layer, Sharpen Texture. And I'll show you what it does immediately by dragging the slider up. There we are. So hopefully you can appreciate the difference there. It's kind of like this micro detail, micro contrast in the midtones. There's a compression aspect to it as well, which we will see as I go through a couple of different examples. On this image, let's see if radius has much of a difference. Yeah, okay, so radius, you end up with some kind of broader contrast enhancement at the expense of very fine detail. Whereas if the radius is a smaller value, you get more of that fine detail. Okay, so again, the key thing here is to experiment and see what you prefer. And then we also have the compression slider, which adds some further compression, especially to the shadows and midtones here. Obviously at 100%, it's a bit overcooked. So what you might do, for example, is bring that up and then bring the strength slider down. And you end up with something like this. So part of the... I haven't entirely succeeded at recreating the exact effect, but if anyone's ever used the Tone Mapping Studio or Persona, if you're a V2 or V1 user, you'll know it has a local contrast slider. And the global contrast and the local contrast are all kind of mapped out accordingly in a destructive process that takes a while to process. And I wanted something that could be approached as a live filter, but that kind of mimics a similar-ish compression effect whilst also enhancing the fine detail, the texture, if you will. So that's kind of how this filter came about. You can see the before and after there, so I've just kind of compressed everything a little bit, but just brought out a little bit of finer detail there as well. Okay, but yeah, I've got quite a few examples to rattle through to give you some more ideas of where this is useful, especially in a photographic context. So let's just show another example of applying it to the whole image. So here's a chapel in where I grew up, actually. And instantly you can see, if I just drag it straight to 100, that's quite a dramatic difference there. And if I zoom in, you'll be able to see even clearer on this example, I think, what difference the radius slider makes. So again, here you have a broader enhancement with stronger contrast, but you kind of lose some of that finer detail, whereas this brings that back. Of course, you could combine radius and compression, like so. Again, overcooked, but then we can bring strength back down, and you can kind of use it to gradually lift the shadows and midtones, but also enhance the texture simultaneously, the fine detail, rather. So there's a couple of examples of applying it kind of globally across the whole image. But it really, I think, is at its best when you're using it to enhance certain subjects. For example, we went to La Palma over New Year, and I got some amazing place. At first, the weather didn't quite cooperate. We had New Year's Eve there, and that was lovely, and we had sunshine. And then for the next 2.5 to 3 days, it rained, and it properly rained. And there were breaks in the inclement weather where you could kind of go out for maybe half an hour to an hour, but it wasn't amazing, and I started to worry a little bit. but we were there for 10 days, and then it picked up. And when you have that kind of extremely rainy weather contrasting with the sun coming out, especially in the evenings, especially up in the mountains, some incredible weather conditions. Crepuscular rays, light breaking through the clouds, shining on the mountain tops, and it was phenomenal. It was just amazing. So we booked to go back there to try and do some astrophotography. But anyway, sorry, enough about that. So anyway, these crabs were down by the coast, and what I'll do here is I'll command click on this mask to reload it as a selection, and I'll add a live texture filter. So that's masked to just the crabs now. And then if I bring the strength slider up, look at the difference that makes. So it really helps bring out a lot of that. I don't like to use this phrase because it's almost become slightly meaningless, but micro detail. Perhaps I don't give that a fair rap. Perhaps micro detail is fine to say. But yeah, I don't think I'll need the compression there, but yeah, there we are. So that's had quite a profound effect on that image there. DM014. No, it's not a recording. This is actually live. I'm just going through the bits and pieces. Support for the 5000 series. As far as I'm aware, that was supposed to be fixed, but if it's not, we'll have to take a look at it. Apparently it was fixed in a driver update. That's as far as we're aware. But if not, then obviously that will need another look at. So I'll put that on the notes. Okay. Yeah, no, sorry. It's absolutely live. There's no smoke and mirrors here. Yeah, so another example then is, again, this was in La Palma. And I was shooting this at 1200 millimeter focal length equivalent f8 with a 2x teleconverter on my lens, and yeah, it's unfortunately the best of the batch of images that I could get. So it's not quite sharp enough for my liking, but it did make a nice example of how you can kind of salvage images that are not quite as perfect as you would want them to be. So we've got all that layer work, and then on top I'll reload that mask and I'll apply the live texture filter, like so. And I think with a bit of moderation, you can just enhance that a bit further. Something like that, maybe. It kind of brings out just a little bit of contouring around the edges. There we are. Okay, so there's another example where you might use it. Let's see. Oh yeah, this was a good one as well. So again, most of these are from La Palma. Oh, it was a nature photographer's dream, basically. Yeah, let's load that mask again. And live texture. And there we go again. You see the difference that makes. It really helps the subject pop out from the background a bit better, just compresses everything, evens everything out, but again, enhances that contrast as well. So you get this perception of more detail, more texture. Okay. What else can we do? Oh yeah, and this one as well. I think this was probably the most profound. We're talking profundity here. So let's load that and then add a live texture filter and bring the strength up. Look at that. So that's made a huge difference to that image there. Especially this detail here, which is almost kind of homogeneous. So there's not a lot of fine detail here because of the very shallow depth of field. But using a texture filter on that, even with a low radius, just using the strength, that's had quite an impact on that image. And of course, you don't have to go that extreme with it. You can be a bit more subtle, but just for the purposes of, especially when you see things on an actual screen recording, I do find I have to exaggerate things so that people really get the full effect. Finally, then, before we move on to other things, the texture filter implementation is kind of in the raw development studio as well. It's implemented as a single slider, so if you want the finer control, you're better off using the live filter. But for those of you who are working with raw files and you just want to add a little bit of textural enhancement, there you go. You've got that option there on the enhance subsection of the basic panel. Okay. You can also, we'll come back to develop later because one of my colleagues has added some more masking options there, which I'm sure will be very well received by people who edit raw files a lot. Okay. So the next one is the tone curve that I want to focus on. I'll just look at the chat. Yeah, okay. Yes, so again, I've done a video tutorial on this, and I am going to rehash a couple of the examples from that just because they're really good and illustrative of what this achieves, basically this new functionality. But then I've got a couple of newer examples where I'll kind of do more of an involved editing workflow on them. So here's an image that I took quite a few years ago. It was one of these, I don't know if you have the same thing abroad, but in the UK, we love to do these things around about Christmas time, like a festival of light, where you'll get like stately homes and so on, and they're open for maybe a month, where they have these light installations and this sort of thing. And I like to go to these things occasionally, at least once a year, because it's like a mecca for getting difficult types of photography, where you've got incredibly dark environments and then very bright, intense lights with artificial colors that you typically wouldn't find in a natural gamut color range. So it's great for trying to improve image processing techniques and that sort of thing. Okay, MacBabber works a little bit like the high pass filter. No, it does quite a significantly different thing. Compared to the high-pass filter. The high-pass filter literally just passes through a certain frequency range with a neutral grey blending, and then you can blend that back into your image using a variety of blending techniques. Texture filter does something a bit different. Okay, where was I? Oh yes, right, so tone curve. Okay, so prior to version 3.1, which is where the tone curve feature was introduced, how would I have tackled this image? I probably would have immediately, as most people do, started playing around with shadows and highlights. Okay, that's one example. That's very colourful. I mean, it's okay, kind of fine. But now I have some more options for that. Maybe something else I could try actually is bumping the exposure up and then taking the highlights down. That's another option, but the problem with that is that you end up with these flat homogeneous regions of intense color. So there's no real meaningful detail here. You could try working in a larger gamut like ROM or Dolby RGB. Probably no, it's not wide enough. But then you're into the realms of color management and so on. And for a lot of people who are getting to grasps with that, yeah, best just stick to the more straightforward aspects rather than having to worry about doing color space conversions all the time. So instead, we can now do something like this. Okay, let's say we push the exposure up. I now have a choice of tone curves. Let me show you what happens when I when I switch to the compressed curve. Okay, instantly we get this much more usable, palatable image. It's flatter tonally, sure, but we've got a nice balance here. You can actually see we've got that meaningful detail in the intense color regions down here. And it would be a nice neutral point to do some further tonal work with, right? We've also got natural, which gives us a bit more contrast. And also, whereas compressed is a bit kind of hyper-realistic, natural will give you a bit more of a color intensity roll-off for brighter regions in the image. So it's perhaps a bit more natural, as the name will suggest, hence why I named it that. So natural is kind of like a nice middle point if you're not convinced with sort of hyper-saturated colors and that sort of thing. Contrast is very, very similar to standard. But if you look at this, the key difference is that standard doesn't do any sort of tone compression. It leaves that up to the user. when I say tone compression, I mean like tone mapping. So taking highlight regions and making sure they're not clipped and, in a displayable range. Contrast will actually do the tone mapping. So if you want a nice one-click solution to make sure, all of your tones fit into standard dynamic range, and there's no obvious kind of highlight clipping going on, there's a nice soft roll-off, then you can try using the contrast tone curve. All of these, apart from standard, perform tone mapping as well. So you never have to worry about, are my tones going to be clipped or anything like that. They're always compressed nicely into the standard dynamic range for you. Log is kind of gimmicky. I debated about putting it in, but for the video users among you who like to work with log footage and you're used to that workflow of using LUTs to as tone shaping and that sort of thing, I thought maybe some people might like to try and work this way. So essentially you get this very compressed logarithmic result that you can then shape yourself, maybe using like curves on the tones panel there. So you could try and do something like this, for example. And really just experiment. You can save presets if you want, but I don't know. It's there. It's useful, I think, for some workflows if people like to really try and do that workflow. It's designed to accommodate all types of different ideas and ways of working, essentially, which I think is quite important. So we got the compressed tone curve, which works well for this. I'll show you another example. Again, I think I did use this in the video tutorial, but it's too good not to reuse, I think. So this was a photo I took earlier this year. Morning winter sun, so it's very harsh. And yeah, with the standard tone curve, you've got quite a high degree of contrast. You've got some highlights here that are perhaps clipping. Compressed will really flatten and even everything out, and suddenly you can see all the detail quite nicely in the dog's face here. Lovely dog, by the way. Natural kind of goes halfway, but can you see that drop in color intensity as well, especially in the bright areas? Let me just show that to you. So there's compressed. You see we've got the slightly more intense green here, and the orangey reds in the fur, and then you've got natural, where it just everything's just dialed back a little bit, but you've got some more contrast as well. And then on top of that, you might add some clarity perhaps, and also some texture. See, one of the things I didn't mention with texture is that it stacks really well with other sharpening techniques like clarity, multi-band sharpen, even unsharp mask. If you layer it on top of those, you get an even more pronounced effect, and they work really well in tandem. So, for example, here's clarity, and then there's a little bit of texture over the top. So texture just really takes what clarity's doing and complements it rather nicely, I think. So yes, there's a couple of tone curve options. Now, I did promise that I would, let's see, yeah, let's look at this one. I did promise that I would do some new examples rather than just using the video tutorial content. So recently for my Easter break, I went to Leamington Spa, and there's a funny story. So I became interested in this structure that I found on Google Maps called Chesterton Windmill. And it's about a 10-minute drive outside of Leamington Spa. And there's a lady who walked her dog, and I saw that. I saw her a couple of mornings on the trot, because I went up there to catch the sunrise in the mornings. And she said, oh yes, this is very popular with students, because apparently it's in a video game. So I looked it up, and I don't play racing games, but it's in Forza Horizon 4. And apparently it's not explicitly given the same name. It's Broadway something, or is the name of the track or the area Broadway? I'm not sure. Apologies for my ignorance there. But yeah, apparently you can do stunts through the middle of the windmill and stuff, which is quite hilarious, but also marginally disrespectful, because the lady was telling me about the troubles that the landowner had with photographers trampling on his crops to get the best shots of the windmill and people just being a bit disrespectful about the building and stuff. So I thought, actually shooting your car through the middle of it and potentially smashing your car into it might have been a tad disrespectful. So I found that quite amusing. But anyway, sorry, I digress. So yes, prior to version 3.1, you might have, because this is an underexposed image, you might have pushed the exposure up and then taken the highlights down. That gives you a certain look, which is fine, but you might want to see what else you can do in terms of balancing out the tones here. So let's reset that. Let's keep the exposure up and then we will try natural. So now we get this nicer balance. So the foreground is better balanced, and the sky, it's still, we haven't kind of pulled all of the highlight tones into this really compressed range, but it's just this really nice roll-off instead, and the colours are not so intense that they look kind of unrealistic. And we could let's just try the others as well. There's compressed. You see what I mean with compressed, though? It's very nice and punchy in terms of colour, but that's not necessarily what you want all of the time. Sometimes you want a bit more of a natural representation, like so. Because you'll also notice the kind of the fainter, almost pastel-esque colours on the structure here. They kind of they have a little bit more contrast as well. So it's all of these little details that matter. Okay, so what should I do with this? Let's try some clarity and some texture as well. That's probably a bit too much, actually. Let's take the texture down. Maybe a hint of saturation, okay? And that's a really nice starting point for an image that was quite severely underexposed, okay? So that's one example. Maybe, I think I've got another one from Chesterton Windmill. Yeah, here we are. So looking out from inside the structure. I'll try a different approach. Rather than push the exposure up this time, I'll switch to a natural tone curve. So immediately we get that nice compression in the highlights here. And then I'll use the shadows slider. So let's push that up. And then maybe some clarity, maybe some texture as well. These aren't my final settings, by the way. I'm just kind of playing around to see what level of, how I can balance the tones out first. In terms of the balancing the overall dynamic range of the image, and then I will maybe go into curves, just add a bit more punch back into this. This isn't personally the style I would necessarily go for, but again, I just wanted to show you the variety of looks or edits you could potentially achieve using the tone curve option now instead. Okay, so that's all fine. That was in 3.1. In 3.2, though, I've kind of expanded on this a little bit in the sense that if you go to Settings, Assistant, and Develop Assistant, you've now got this option called Default Tone Curve. And so you can set the default tone curve that is used whenever you open a RAW file. So if I set this to compressed, for example, and then I close that down and I open just a singular RAW file, it defaults to compressed. So if you like the look of a particular tone curve, especially one that does the tone mapping for making sure you don't have clipped tones or anything, then you can always use that by default with your RAW images. But that's not the main bit of this. The main improvement is that for panorama, stack, HDR merge, and focus merge, previously, when loading RAW files, we would use a simplified RAW loading process, mainly for memory reasons and loading speeds. But it's kind of skipped a number of reasonably important things for ensuring optimum RAW quality. So it didn't do automatic lens corrections, it didn't do noise reduction, it didn't do sharpening, it didn't do the better color handling for extreme, like, if you've worked with images that have magenta or purple color casts, there was some additional adaptations put into the full develop process that wouldn't be present in the simplified version used for these merge operations. So in 3.2, the full process is now used. So you get all of those extra benefits, but also it will use the tone curve that you've mandated in the preferences. And what I've done is I've installed 3.1 as a beta alongside, ignore that, the recent thumbnail image of the man crying pixel tears. There's a bit of an in-joke there, but don't worry, it's nothing sordid or unsafe for work. But yeah, I won't go into explaining it. So to really demonstrate this benefit clearly, what I will do is stitch a panorama with raw files. So these are DNGs from a Mavic drone. I think the exposure compensation was set down a little bit just to try and make sure that highlight detail was captured sufficiently. Now, if I just stitch these raw files, so this is in 3.1 without the new raw development, the full develop pipeline, as we might refer to it. Look at the result that we get here, okay? So bearing in mind it has to do exposure equalization, we end up with not a fantastic result. The foreground is quite underexposed and dark, and the highlights, yeah, that's a problem. So you would have to pre-process these raw files, make them as tonally flat as possible to ensure that the exposure equalization didn't inadvertently clip the highlight detail here. Or you'd have to stitch them to an HDR document, and that has workflow implications as well. So we want to try and avoid all that. So now let me show you what that same result looks like when you stitch the same panorama in 3.2 using the compressed tone curve. That's probably the most key part of this, is using that tone curve that tone maps everything as well. So the highlight values are all in standard, they all fit into standard dynamic range. Already on the thumbnail, you can see quite a difference here. Let's see what the final stitched result looks like. Ajax, does texture enhance noise? Yeah, if you've got a really noisy image, you would probably want to denoise it to a degree first. All sharpening will unfortunately enhance noise to a certain degree. Multiband probably... multiband is probably the most sympathetic option if you have an image with lots of noise. But yeah, they will all inherently enhance noise to a certain degree as well. So I would just use like a live denoise filter beforehand, or the other thing, which you've seen in my examples, is just mask your sharpening to the crucial areas that you want to sharpen. So if you've got a subject and a background, just sharpen the subject. And in fact, what I usually do is I denoise the background as well to make the images more efficient for compression, because you don't have all the random noise in the background pixels that it then has to encode. Anyway, so look at the difference here. There we are. Let me just make them fit to screen so I can command tab between them. Okay, so a couple of things to notice here. One is obviously tonally the image is much better balanced. The highlight detail is all present and correct, so that hasn't been clipped as a result of the exposure equalization. The other thing you might notice is there's some geometric distortion differences, and that's because in 3.2 you get the automatic lens correction as well. So we will have applied a lens correction profile for the Mavic drone, and in theory it should also make the stitching more accurate with fewer seam issues, in theory. But I have actually found that works. I had another drone image. Actually, it was the Ulverston one. Where was it? This one here. That was I stitched that from a panel of 9 images, and I found that without the lens correction, there was a bit of a seam issue in the actual lighthouse. Whereas with lens correction, that was perfect. So yeah, hopefully a lot of people who work with RAW and want to merge their RAW files directly for panorama stitching, focus merging, HDR merge, stuff like that, you'll all benefit from the improved RAW development quality here. Okay, so it's taken me a while to get through all these, isn't it? It's let's just quit that. Okay. Let's move on then to Multi-Band Sharpen. Yeah, I won't spend too long on this. So, I was looking at some of the release videos for 3.2, and a lot of the videos have mistakenly kind of highlighted that the Multi-Band Sharpen filter is new. It's not new. It was in version 3. The difference is that there's a new mode for it called Fine Detail. And the reason that's in there is it's entirely selfish. It's mainly for astrophotography imagery, especially, or in particular, solar imaging. So let me show you how it's kind of designed to be used. First of all, I'll just make a selection of the sun disk. So if anyone's into astrophotography or you're interested in getting into it, you can get these smart telescopes, they're called, and I picked up a Dwarf 3 recently at the start of this year. And I imaged like the Rhine Nebula, all the usual things that you try when you first get a new piece of gear. But also I was interested in, it comes with a solar filter, and you can image the sun with it. So I thought I would give that a try. And this is the result that you get. But there's a lot of post-processing goes into the final image, and I actually picked the kind of the raw fit file, which is quite soft. So I wanted some way of really enhancing the detail on the surface of the sun here. So I landed on this. So if I apply multiband just selectively to the sun disk, here's the default method, which works well for all kinds of different imagery, but it doesn't really seem to do anything here. So instead, there's a new method called Fine Detail. Now, as I crank all these sliders to the maximum, look at that. So you can now bring out all of that really fine detail that was hiding in the surface of the sun. In fact, you can even go overkill and check hard blend, and you end up with that. So from this to that. So it's quite an expressive filter, and that's kind of 99% of the use case for this particular new feature. But luckily, it does have an interesting effect for regular photography as well. So I'll just demonstrate that as well. Let's make a selection of the subject and then add a multi-band sharpen filter. Switch to, actually, I'll show you what standard does. Okay, so you see standard, it's kind of a nice, subtle, sympathetic detail enhancement there. It's very subtle. It's difficult to show on screen share. That's really nice, and it was I mainly implemented it for astrophotography imagery, but it's just a really nice way of enhancing detail in traditional imagery without the kind of typical sharpening artifacts you get with unsharp mask, for example. But if we try fine detail instead, we get a different effect. Notice it's more of like a highlight contrast enhancement. It's kind of like this fine, bright sheen of detail over everything. So there are use cases for this for traditional imagery as well. There's a before, there's the after. Again, just feel free to experiment with these new pieces of functionality and see if you can get on with them. See if you can achieve some interesting effects with them. Okay, so next, yeah, the tone brush tool. Now, I thought so I'll cover the compositing use first. This was kind of developed in tandem with the live tone blend group. They're kind of trying to achieve similar purposes with them, but just with very different approaches. One is more automated, one is for those of you who like a more manual approach. You know, you like that satisfaction of having more of a hand in the blending process. But it also has a dodge and burn mode for non-destructive dodge and burning, which is very useful for photography. So I'll cover that as well. But I would like to stress, because I did have a comment on the video tutorial from someone who was kind of like, I think they did actually say they didn't watch the video all the way through, which is fair enough. But they kind of got the impression that it was literally just a new brush tool to automate dodging and burning. And so if you're a seasoned professional and you know how to do the dodging and burning with new layers and all the rest of it, then this tool seems pointless to me. But actually, it has a whole different mode that's really, really useful that you can't easily do manually. So here's the tool, and I'm going to change the method to blend, okay, and set the insertion type to clip then sibling. And this will clip the created layer, the created tone blend layer inside my fox cutout here. So as you can see, my fox doesn't really look like it belongs in the scene at the moment. I want to blend it. And one of the techniques we can use for this is to brush around the edges of the cutout or the subject and continuously sample from surrounding pixel colors, surrounding color data. Of course, if you're constantly holding Alt or Option and then color picking and then painting and then doing it again, and it becomes quite tiresome. So what this tool does is it actually, I'll just make sure I got my settings correct here, it actually continuously samples from the color data behind your layer. For example, let me just start painting. It's easier to show you. Okay, you're probably not seeing much of a result at the moment. So let's go over again. And again, as I'm actually doing it, it's kind of hard to see what's happening. It's a very subtle approach because my opacity is low up here. But if I actually hide the layer, you'll immediately see the difference. And if I solo the layer, you can see very faintly what's happened here. Can you see the brush stroke? It mainly looks kind of like a mid-grey, but I've got hints of color in there as well. And so what it's doing is dynamically, as it's brushing along, it's continuously taking the color data from the underlying layer content, the composite content, and it's blending it with the current brush nozzle. So we can also build up multiple layers. This is a non-destructive process. I might try reflect maybe, and then this is just experimentation really. Let's go over that again. Okay, yeah, that looks all right. Maybe I will try multiply, and then just darken this area down here, like so, and maybe up here as well. Maybe go back to overlay and do another layer, like so. Again, as I'm painting, you're not really, or at least even as I'm doing it, I'm not going, oh wow, I can see a dramatic difference. But if you then take your layers and you hide them, and then you look at the result that you've achieved using this new tool, it can be quite compelling. It's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I see, I get it now, I see what it's doing. I'm just trying to think of another example here. Yeah, so even with photography imagery, you could try something like this. So we're not even on dodge and burn yet, we're on blend. Let's say I set the mode to parent. It will then create a new layer as I brush, but it will continuously sample from the composite up to that point, just underneath the blend tone layer, and then it will blend that content into my brush nozzle as I'm painting. And of course I can go over again and enhance that further. So if again, it's very subtle, but if I hide this, there's the before, there's the after. So it's just a nice little enhancement, a bit more colorful in the tops of the mountains here. Maybe I could try reflect and paint that in. I might need to take the opacity down once I'm finished brushing, but there we are. It just enhances that as well. You can see there. So it's worth experimenting using the, even if you're not into composite workflows, if you're just purely into photography, it's worth experimenting with the blend brush as well. The blend method on the tone brush tool, just to see if it gives you an effect that you like. I will, however, just demonstrate the classic dodge and burn as well. So, we'll start with the raw file here. We're using a compressed tone curve. That's fine. Let's go for clarity. Bit of that. Bit of texture as well. And then develop that. I'll just move my microphone down because I'm a bit conscious that it's completely obscuring my lower face. There we go. Yeah, that's slightly better. Okay. So, for black and white conversions, which I'm going to do here, I like to use channel mixer rather than black and white. The reason being is that when you use channel mixer and you set the output channel to grey, it does a weighted intensity conversion. So the red, green and blue channels are weighted in terms of their contribution. So green has the highest weighting, then red, then blue. And it's, you know, where you can kind of argue in terms of how accurate this is, but it gives us a more accurate rendition of luminosity or brightness rather than just taking your 3 channels and dividing them by 3. So weighting it is, you know, for example, we are more receptive or more sensitive to green wavelengths of light, then red, and then finally very significantly less sensitive to blue. So it's supposed to kind of mimic that weighting, essentially. Okay, so let's get the tone brush tool. We'll set the mode to dodge, burn, blend mode to overlay, and yeah, I think that's pretty much good to go. So then I'll just brush into the darker area to dodge it, like so. Then I might add a brightness contrast adjustment, bring the contrast up, and then layer another dodge burn tone layer over the top of that. So to all of you haters out there who are like, well, what's the point of this? We can do dodge and burn anyway, non-destructively using pixel layers. Yes, but imagine you're a new user, you're not that familiar with layers, you read about all these dodge burn techniques, you know, you read about the technique where you add a new pixel layer, you fill it with 50% grey, you set the blend mode, and then on top of that, you've got to take your paintbrush tool. You've got to figure out how to make it bigger, but also how to take the hardness down for a nice soft-edged nozzle. And by the time you've explained all that to somebody, either in text or video or in person, imagine for a new user, it's a fair amount to take in. You know, if if we've got the muscle memory or the knowledge, then you know all of these things just roll off the tip of the tongue. But for a new user especially, trying to remember all those specific steps can be quite a hardship sometimes. So I just thought it would be nice to have a tool that sets all that up for you. Dodge, burn, you know, the hardness of the brush is 0 by default. It's got a low opacity, so you can kind of build up with multiple brush strokes like you would want to. And you can just start brushing on. And it even does the non-destructive layer-based approach for you. It creates new layers with the correct blending setup ready to go. It also uses, if I show you here, you can change the tonal range that it brushes into, and that will actually dictate the blend ranges, which are on this option here. They're incredibly powerful, but for a new user, they don't know that clicking the cog accesses these 2 graphs where you can blend based on tonal range. So having an option right there that's very obvious in terms of what it does, hopefully will be a benefit to them as well. Okay, so slight rant over. There we are. Right. Following on from that though, what I've also done is I've added tonal range to the adjustment and the filter brush tools. Why? Because it's nice to have options. For example, I'm going to get niche again with you here in terms of the workflow application, but essentially, let's say we want to enhance the structure of the Orion Nebula here. We might get the filter brush tool, we might choose clarity, and we'll brush it on like so. Okay. That looks okay at a first glance, but the problem with this is that It's not necessarily a problem, but you might not want this behavior. Look at the stars. It kind of blows out some of the star detail, especially around here, makes it clipped almost. Kind of, you get a bit of star bloat as well, that sort of stuff. You might not want that, especially with advanced astrophotography post-production workflows. A lot of care is taken not to stretch out the highlight details so much that it starts to clip early in the whole process. So I'll merge a new layer with that clarity application on it, just to show you the before and after. And then let me set the range to shadows and brush in the clarity again. Okay, so now let's evaluate the difference. So I turn on this pixel layer. So this is what right, I do apologize. I had hoped that wouldn't happen, but that's my mesh router playing up again. It's actually still not working, but I've got a Wi-Fi dongle adapter that's connected to a different router. So hopefully, oh, it's back now. Okay. I do apologize about that. So I'm going to try and continue going through, and hopefully it will catch up. But yes, I shall be having, I'm probably going to look at swapping my mesh router system out, because that's just unacceptable. Not to nerd out, but basically I've got a mesh router downstairs which is connected to the ONT, and then I've got one up here which gives me my full gigabit connectivity. And I'm hardwired into that one. It literally just started flashing and it lost connection. Not very good, is it? Sorry about that. So I'm not quite sure where we got up to. I think I was basically just showing you the difference between when you use the live clarity filter to avoid, using the tonal range to avoid adversely affecting the star detail. Please, someone in the chat rescue me and say that you can actually see this now. It would be tremendously reassuring, so that I'm not just talking to an empty room. Okay. So, yeah, moving on then. One of my colleagues, as mentioned earlier, has, for 3.2, has put more masking options in. Okay. And essentially, you can now do more selective editing directly within the raw development workspace or studio. Okay. Actually, sorry, before I do that, sorry, it's that loss of connectivity has got me all turned upside down now, unfortunately. But I did have one more thing I wanted to show you with the tonal range. So here's the adjustment brush tool, and I will switch the adjustment type to brightness contrast. We are reusing this image, yes. And if I brush in here to enhance the brightness contrast of the foreground detail, yeah, that's fine, but it kind of brightens up these areas. So we might want to try something different. So instead, I'll set the range to shadows, and then brush in again. And this time, we're not making the areas down here overly bright. Can you see what that's doing there? So we're just enhancing all of the darker areas around the lit umbrellas, but we're not overly sacrificing the nice colourful tones that we get there. Okay, so sorry, I didn't want to skip past that bit. Right, so back to where we were. So masking in the Develop Studio. Okay, let's go over to masks, and here on the mask flyout, you'll see we have some more options now. So we have object selection mask, luminosity range, and hue range as well. Okay, so another way we can get to this, by the way, is by selecting the object selection tool over there if we want to make an object selection mask. So in this case, it will be the robin. Okay. And he turns red until we start to apply something selectively to the mask, just to let us know which area is going to be masked. What I might do is increase the texture like so, increase the saturation as well, and perhaps also do a bit of a tone curve thing like that. Yeah, that's nice. Maybe even enhance the contrast a little bit. And the thing is, as I'm editing through this, I realized a couple of things. One, I want to denoise the image, so let's do that. And also, I'm not sure if a compressed tone curve works very well for this. So let's go back to masks and master, go back to details, luminance. So what I've done there is I've moved back to the master masks. That's the whole image, essentially. So I've denoised that. And then also I'll change the tone curve, maybe to natural. Yeah, I think that looks a bit better. There we are. And then I can go back to the pixel mask and resume my selective edits, like so. So you can build up multiple masks and so on. Yeah. Okay. If anyone wants to just type some random gobbledygook into the chat, again, that would be really reassuring, because at the moment, the last thing my chat says is unable to connect to chat. Please try again later. So, yeah, if anyone wants to just mash the keyboard and smash return, just to let me know you're all alive, that would be much, I'd be much obliged. Okay, so I just want to show you another example with raw masks, and it's a bit of an interesting one, actually. So I just wanted to show you the luminosity range and the hue range masks as well. So for this image, it's a bit of an odd one maybe, but I'll go for a natural tone curve, bring the exposure up, and then let's move across to the luminosity range masks. And we will add, sorry, did I say luminosity range? I'll move across to the masks panel even. You can tell that loss of connectivity has really thrown me. I do apologize. So we'll go for a luminosity range mask. And then what we'll do is use it to target the darker areas of the image more prominently than the brighter areas. So we'll do something like that. Okay, I'm just going to refresh the chat, hopefully. Aha. Oh, wow. Yes, sorry, I had to refresh the chat widget. So let me just catch up, see if there are any questions here. Yeah, okay, apologies. So there was a question about more drawing features and functionality. That's not really my area, but yeah, I think, you know, vector illustration users will have some nice things soon, I think, yeah. So, but I'm not really involved in all of that process, so I can't say any more. But yeah. Okay. So, where was I? Yeah, so I've got this luminosity range mask, and I might increase the texture slightly, and then also use a tone curve to brighten the detail here. But what I'm avoiding doing is significantly brightening the really bright areas, if that makes sense. I say the word bright a lot in that sentence. So there we are. You can see how it's not really affecting the sky. Well, it's affecting the blue tones in the sky, but not the clouds. Okay, so luminosity range mask is useful for that purpose. Then I'll also try a hue range mask, and I know it seems really bizarre, like there's not a lot of color in this image. What would you use hue range for? I mean, you could use it for the sky, but unfortunately there's a lot of blue in the structure as well. So where's he going with this, I wonder? So if I bring it over here, you can target the tones, the brighter tones here that are kind of a yellow reddish. And I can also use a low pass to smooth those out a bit as well. And then for this, I will really drag texture up. So let me zoom in. You can see what's happening there. See that there? Okay. Saturation up as well, maybe. Get a bit more color in those detail bits there. Curves as well. Let's increase. Let's really make these quite prominent. Something like that. And then I might just take saturation back down a little bit as well. So if you like to make these really kind of selective, precise edits, then hue range is actually a kind of an underrated option. Look at the difference that can make there. Just adds this little flavor of texture to the image. Almost makes it look a bit more grimy as well. But again, see, you can blend it with the opacity as well. So if I'm not convinced about the effect at 100%, I could kind of blend it halfway. And that might do something interesting there. So yeah, you may have, if you've been familiar with the masking in Develop from previous versions, you might also have noticed that I have added a few more things for masking capabilities. So the texture filter can be masked. So can sharpening, so you can use detail refinement to sharpen areas as well, although you probably won't see much difference there. But that's great for selectively sharpening a subject that you've made a selection of. And tones, you can now use curves as well. Okay, so yeah, just some additional options there that you can use for the masking process. Okay, so we're near the end of the live stream anyway. I've just got a few more things to show you before I sign off. One of them is, even I would say it's slightly gimmicky, at the moment anyway. It's focus peaking. So in Develop, you've got this new option up here. And what it does is it will darken the overall image, but it will overlay this colored indicator of where the sharpest points are, where the most detailed points of the image are. So for this way, you can, so for this, you can check critical sharpness or critical focus on your images. Here I can see that the areas in focus are the areas that I want. That's good. You can even change the color just by cycling through. And this is a non-destructive preview thing. So if you then click Develop, it goes away. But when you bring Develop back up by double-clicking the Develop layer, then you get the focus peaking back and you can turn it on and off like that. So just to give you another example of where this is quite useful, I've got two images that were taken in a burst. And if I turn focus peaking on for both of these, like so, maybe change the color as well. Looking at them, can you see from a distance? You can see one has much more red. That's the sharper image. This one, you can kind of see the red areas are blurred. They've got a direction to them. Let me just denoise that so we can actually see. There we are. So can you see that the actual, the red highlight areas have a horizontal streak to them? Whereas these areas, if we denoise that as well, these do not. They're almost like perfectly square or circular. So just from an off glance, you can tell that's the sharper of the two images. I want that one. This would hopefully be more useful for some sort of cataloging process. For example, at the moment, I use a piece of software to go through and cull images. And I use the focus peaking feature on that to quickly sort out which images have that critical sharpness that I want to work with. And then I can reject the other images where, you know, the focus didn't quite nail the eye of the subject or that sort of thing. So yeah, just a fancy little thing to play with there. Okay. So in 3.1, the glitch filter had a couple of updates. I don't think these were, I think they were mentioned in the release notes, but they're so small that you could kind of miss them, really. So I'll show you what they are. Essentially, the glitch filter had its debut in version 3, or Affinity by Canva, and it had a number of different glitch types that you could apply. But I don't know why I didn't do it for the main launch, but I corrected it in version 3.1. So ripple and waves were only available as color, what I call color channel separation methods. So for example, here's ripple with the original implementation. So you can see effectively different strengths are applied to each channel. So you get this really cool channel separation effect. And it's the same with waves as well. And I thought that's great for most glitch effects, that's fine. But then I did realize, well, why didn't I just put them as regular versions where all three channels are treated equally? So you now have that. You have ripple and waves. So you can have the ripple effect like so. And waves. There we are. Okay. But there's also a new method called data blocks, or a new glitch type, I should say, rather. And this works better, I think, if I apply it to each composite layer individually. So let's get this one here. I'll show you what this does. So it kind of overlays pixelated blocks over the top of the image, like so. But probably the coolest part is that you can displace the blocks as well. So you can really kind of have this interesting glitch effect going on, and you can change the block distribution as well. So you can kind of customize the effect in some degree of depth. There's also a color slider. So you can have really saturated data blocks if you want, or you can suck some of the color out. And yeah, there's that. So then what I can do is option click to clone the filter and then do something different for this one here. Maybe just pull that apart horizontally. Do the same for this one over here. Again, we'll go for horizontal displacement and maybe try a different distribution value, that sort of thing. So it's probably not the best example, but I'm sure some people will find a use for that. I did have it's easier to demonstrate on something like this, the astronaut. So if he's just a cutout at the moment, but if I add the data blocks glitch to him, there we are. So you clearly see what the effect does, and then you can displace the blocks like so. And again, this is a live effect as well. So this is just applying as a live filter. It's reasonably stable as well, which is quite nice. Some things as live filters are hard to implement in a stable manner as you zoom in and out, but this is okay. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that in case that gives some people ideas as to how to use it. Finally then, for 3.2, I did introduce a lot of astrophotography related improvements. I say a lot, I mean a lot of smaller improvements, but ultimately they make the workflow much easier for when you're stacking data and you're color mapping it if you're using mono data, that sort of thing. I decided not to try and cover that in a live stream involving everything else, because also there are a couple of things I want to get into the next release. And I thought I would wait for those and maybe then do kind of a very esoteric astrophotography live stream, perhaps on the back of whatever new functionality goes into the next release as well. But weight it more towards like an astrophotography workflow. I'll probably get about 2 people watching that, but you never know. But I thought I would leave you with this teaser because I've improved this for the next version. It's now like a configurable filter, but for now you've got a couple of you might spy this option is new as well, but you've got this auto stretch. So once you've stacked your astrophotography data, you can choose not to apply an automatic tone stretch, which is curves and levels and all of that business, or an adjustment layer, but instead you can do this one-shot filter command, which does something like this. Okay, so it does a really nice sympathetic stretch specifically for astrophotography imagery, where all of your bright star detail has its detail is the highlight detail is maintained, but at the same time a lot of the fainter detail is stretched so you can really see it. Okay, so there's the Orion Nebula, of course. So there's the before, there's the after, and you get this really nice, just out-of-the-box stretch. I'll show you another example quickly. So there's another stretch method, which is great for producing slightly brighter imagery. There we are. So that's my, I was really proud of this one. I did it from my back garden, and it's quite a tight focal length shot of the North American Nebula. I was really happy with that, but that's what it looks like before and after. And finally, Tarantula Nebula, you might notice you've got these two options here, HDR, neutral, and balanced. And if I run one of those, on a standard dynamic range screen, you'll probably go, that looks horrific. Why would you ever want to use that? If you were using an HDR display, or like a MacBook Pro panel or something like that, you would actually see the extended brightness values and you'd go, oh, wow, that looks really cool. And to this day, I don't think any astrophotography stacking and post-production software does this. I mean, they have a lot of stretches with terms like HDR in the name of the stretch and the processing type, but I don't think they actually produce like an unbounded result that you can preview on an HDR display and have actual HDR astrophotography images. So I don't know, maybe there is, and this isn't anything new, but hopefully it's quite exciting because it looks really cool seeing bright nebula core and you know, star detail that actually jumps off the screen because it's really bright. But one thing you can do is you can stretch it to HDR, and then you can use the tone compression adjustment or tone mapping if you prefer, the Tone Map Studio, to then kind of apply some bespoke tone mapping to the result. You see, see what the difference the color slider makes there as well. Okay, so for example, if you try the neutral or balanced stretch, but you're not quite convinced about it, and you want to do your own tone mapping, then you can just stretch to HDR values instead, and then do your own tone mapping. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I will admit I'm slightly disappointed about my internet connectivity dropping 3/4 of the way in. That was a bit grueling, but never mind. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for your patience with this live stream. I hope some of it was interesting and useful. Just see if there are any questions. What software do you use for culling? Personally, I use Fast Raw Viewer. That has the focus peaking on the P key. So I can just use the left and right arrow keys, cycle through my images in a, what's it called, like a strip format. And then I can turn focus peaking on. So say I've taken a burst of, I don't know, 50 images of a bird or something. I can just turn focus peaking on, cycle through the images, look at the detail and go, okay, that one looks like it's plausibly in focus. I'll color tag that, move on to the next one. And so it helps me very quickly color tag images based on whether I think they're going to be acceptably sharp or not. Oh, do we plan to make use of the new DNG format from DxO? I don't know, we'll have to have a look at that. We'll have to produce some DNG files and look at the output and see what happens. It could be dependent on the raw library that we use. They may have to update, and then we'll just update our implementation of it. We'll see. But yeah, I gather it's quite popular. It's like a compressed format, isn't it? That helps you pre-process the raw files to linear DNGs, but with a bit of file size saving, which is quite useful. Yeah, so we'll probably take a look at that at some point. Yeah, so I'll just waffle slightly for another 30 seconds just to let the stream catch up and see if there are any questions. Yeah, waffle, and I'll just sort of move around. Maybe I'll just apply some shadow blended clarity to the Tarantula Nebula here while I'm waiting to see if any final chat messages come through. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Excellent. MacBaba, yes. Yeah, it's a constant improvement process. We should never be static, never stand still with this. Part of the exciting aspect is, I mean, I haven't really, I guess this is part of why I like to do these live streams, is I don't particularly focus on the AI functionality. I know that's a big pull for many people, and I like using it myself as well, but in these live streams, I like to focus on the kind of, I guess you'd call it classical now, like classical techniques, more kind of handcrafted type approach to image editing and manipulation. But yeah, the exciting part is as well as concurrently developing all of the really cool progressive AI functionality, we can take the opportunity to look at more kind of handcrafted techniques and try and innovate there a little bit as well. A lot of stuff has already been done, and it's been done well, but there's always room for a smidge of creativity, I feel, maybe to kind of introduce concepts or ideas that people haven't really thought of before. So it's quite exciting. And of course, there are fundamental improvements to be made as well. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate, closing the forum. I do know. I can't really speak too much about that decision because it's not really my area of expertise or involvement, really. I know there's Discord. I know some people are vehemently against that because it's a different format. It's not as categorically organized as a forum, and I get that as well. There is a third-party forum that's quite popular, Korea Forum, I think, or Korea Fora. I can't remember the name now, apologies. That's run by one of the long-time Serif fans and contributors. So that's quite a good place to check out. I think I have frequented that a couple of times. And a lot of the that typical forum discourse is still present there. That kind of that back and forth that you would want, and that kind of archival of interesting information. Yeah, that's all present there. Ooh, elongated stars in an astrophoto. I don't know. I wonder if you would probably make a selection of highlight detail and then maybe use like a minimum blur. Not sure. I don't know if I have maybe this image might be the closest. You could kind of shrink stars. I don't know if you would have to mask it. Let me just have a look. Okay, so if you use something like a minimum blur, but then you use blend ranges to blend it out of the darker detail, will that work? Possibly not very effectively. Let's see, does that do anything? Oh, it kind of does something. It does a thing, as we would say. Whether or not it's an appropriate thing, I don't know. In fact, I'll reset that. It's better with that, wasn't it? So just blending based on the source layer range, you can get some sort of, it kind of narrows the star detail a little bit. It may be worth experimenting with a minimum blur. I wonder if another way of doing it might be to, gosh, I haven't used flood select in eons. Let's try take contiguous off, something like that. Maybe the tolerance needs to come up a bit. Something like that. Yeah, maybe slightly more tolerance. Slightly more. What I'm doing to increase the tolerance, by the way, is I'm holding the left mouse button down and just dragging to the right. Okay, how's that selection of stars? That's all right, I think. Yeah, and then maybe I would apply a minimum blur to that, perhaps. Ooh, that's slightly dodgy. I might have needed to expand the... Hang on a minute. Let me go back to there. So you've got me on a tangent now, Beatrice. So Let's see, shall I grow maybe by a small amount? And then minimum blur mask to that. Oh, gone too far there. Let's try that. And then what about layer it on top of that? Okay, so we've come across something slightly different, which is dimming the stars. So I've used a masked minimum blur and then also a minimum blur with blend ranges set on it. And I've come across something like that. So I don't know necessarily about correcting elongation of stars, but yeah, you can certainly dim the stars, and that might have an interesting effect, you know, when, in fact, if I bring them above, can I then push the tones further? I move that underneath, does that make any difference? Yeah, there we are. Yeah, interesting. So apologies, it's not quite what you asked for, but that was an interesting little workflow that we've just discovered there. Cool. Right. Okay. Yeah, I will have to call it, I'm afraid. Got to go and have tea or something. I'm starving. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for attending this live stream. Again, I'm sorry it kind of dropped out in the middle there, but yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, Beatrice, yeah. Yeah, there isn't anything really, I'm afraid. But you've given me an idea. I'll have a play around. I'll see if I can come up with something. Yeah. Okay. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for your time and your patience. And I will see you in the next live stream, hopefully, by which point I will have sorted out my mesh routers and hopefully had got something a bit more reliable in place. These routers, these Asus mesh routers, fantastic for speed because I've got gigabit internet, and I was determined. I was like, no, you know, I want gigabit connectivity in my office without trailing wires all around the house. So they seem to fit the bill, but occasionally, especially I think if I'm pushing a lot of data through transmitting through consistently, sometimes they'll just like the mesh router in my office will just randomly lose connection. So it's got a fantastic connection most of the time. It's excellent, it says, and the transmit rate is like over a gigabit. It's like 1,400 megabits, but then randomly the light will just start flashing and it will lose connection entirely, which, as you can imagine, is a bit frustrating. But there we are. Enough rant over. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. And I'll just put an end card on while I stick around for a couple of minutes to answer anything in the chat. See you soon. Thank you.